Howdy folks, in front of you is a custom Kershaw Tremor in Bohler K110 that I've recently finished. Now the Tremor is one of my all-time favorite folding knives, enough so that I've bought multiples of them while they were available. Now this model is sadly discontinued. Really not sure why Kershaw did that. It was a very popular model that sold extremely well, so I don't know why they discontinued it. But what I can tell you is that this is one of the best built overseas produced Kershaws that I've ever owned, and I've owned a lot of them. And it's a knife that it just looks cool. The design is oriented more towards being a self-defense knife, and it does look quite menacing. It's also one of the best cutting tactical knives that I've ever experienced. The ones that I've measured came stock from the factory at 0.3 millimeters behind the edge, which is quite thin. And it's a deep, high, hollow grind, so it cuts extremely well. Really, the only detrimental aspect there is because it is a deep, high, hollow grind that is that thin. Durability is not going to be fantastic, so I wouldn't really recommend batoning with it or, stabbing through car doors or anything like that, because you'd probably end up rippling the primary grind. So, I wanted something with a meatier, more heavy-duty blade that held an edge longer, but was still geared towards cutting performance. So the obvious thing to do would be to, custom make a blade for the handle. And I've seen a lot of people pimp Tremors over the years, but it seems like all they ever do is, make custom handle scales for it, or change the finish of the blade, do an acid stone wash, something like that. And while I can appreciate the artistic customization there, my interests are geared more towards cutting performance. So, I needed a more high-performance blade for this awesome knife. So here's what I came up with. Now I'll start with the handle first. I did a couple changes here. The most obvious is the hardware. Now, my only knock against this knife was that the handle screws it came with, the smaller ones, were piss poor. They're a very odd size. It's somewhere between a standard and a metric, but it's also somewhere between a Torx and a hex. So I was never able to find a mini driver that could fit the handle screws very well, at least the stock ones. So I went to my local hardware store, bought some replacement screws, and they work a hell of a lot better. The size for the screws, it's a metric 1.5, and by getting, flathead screws, I can put a lot more torque down onto these handle screws without risking stripping out the head, which was the biggest problem with the stock ones, because not only were they a weird size, but they were exceptionally soft, and, it was trivial to strip them out and then not be able to get them out of the knife handle. Additionally, I rounded all of the edges on the G10. Now, the knife does come with all the edges radiused, but I made that radius more gradual, and by doing that, I made the knife a lot more ergonomic and comfortable in hand. And it is a really cool handle. It's supposed to be a pistol grip style handle, and I can see that. And it does give you quite a few grip options. You can hold it back here, you can choke up more, or you can choke up even more. And that's something that is not only good in a tactical role, but also in a utility role. If you really need to cut something and put a lot of power into it, there you go. Now for the blade, the most obvious difference here. I did change a few things between this and the stock blade. I have a stock model here, which I will bring in just a minute. Now, I made this blade bigger. Not only did I make it wider, but I made it about 1/8 of an inch longer. And I was able to do that without running into any issues. I mean, I could fit more knife blade into this handle than they give you, so, why not? Once again, approaching that ideal 1-to-1 ratio, which isn't really possible on this model. It's like a 5 1/4 inch handle that comes stock with a 3 1/2, 3 3/4 inch blade. But I did make the blade bigger. and didn't run into any issues with the edge slamming into the back spacer when closed or the tip poking out the front here. As you can see, it is a full height convex, and it is done very cleanly. This is off of a 800 grit cork belt. Do have some weird things going on here near the edge. One of the belts I was using did get some grit contamination. Tried to get all that out, got most of it out, so it is hard to tell when I don't have a light spotted on it, that there's anything wrong. Ground exceptionally thin. It is 5 thou for this rear portion, then I let it thicken up to about 6 thou in the belly, and then it thickens up even more towards the tip to at least give the tip some durability. Now, one of the problems when doing a recurve blade is that the portion in the recurve ends up being thicker behind the edge than the heel or the belly. And that's just by design, because the edge is going to be higher up at that point. The grind isn't going to get as much time to go down to where it terminates at the edge. So I spent a lot of time sort of mitigating that and making sure that the edge was fairly consistent, and I adjusted it to the thicknesses that I wanted. I wanted a little more durability here in the belly, and I wanted the back to be able to cut extremely well. As you can see, there aren't any weird things going on where the angle got off while I was convexing it. And the way I do that, I do a full flat grind, and then I convex that full flat grind. So my convexes are very lean, and they cut extremely well. And if we can focus on that edge bevel, you can see just how thin it is. Now, this was sharpened on the wicked edge. I had the arm set up to 15.00 degrees per side, but because of this recurve, it isn't going to be a consistent 15 degrees along the entire length of the edge, but it will be fairly close. And both sides, of course, are of equal width. And that finish took a long-ass time to do. This Bohler K110 does not grind easy. It does not polish easy. In fact, I thought this blade was going to be relatively easy to finish grinding. It was sub 20 thou when I had it heat treated, but it actually took longer than most of the other knives. Number one, because of the recurve. It is difficult to do a recurve and get it ground this thin, because of course where it is curved here, basically the corners of the belt are going to be all that want to hit the primary grind in the edge, and you can run into some issues there. So all this was done on a 1x30 with ceramic belts, and it still took a long-ass time to do. Now, it is a full distal taper with a relatively fine point, as you can see. Not as fine as some of the others that I've done. I wanted to at least factor in, some durability here, but I can guarantee you it is quite pokey. A couple other things I changed were sort of the flipper and ricasso. The ricasso wasn't huge on the stock model, but I shortened it just a little bit, made the sharpening notch smaller, made the flipper smaller, and I did all that so that I could bring the cutting edge as close to the handle as I possibly could, of course, to minimize the leverage disadvantage that the stock model had, although it wasn't that bad. Now I'm going to show you the stock model so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. As you can see, the ricasso is a little bit larger. The sharpening notch is definitely larger, although it is a very well done, very functional sharpening notch. You can get the edge all the way back to it without running into any issues. Now this one has been sharpened quite a few times, so the bevel is going to be wider than they come from the factory with. But as you can hopefully see, the blade on the one I made is larger than the stock model. give you some glamour shots of this. Of course, there is some oil near the edge. Do that to protect the edge, because I spent so many hours sharpening this edge and the wicked edge. This Bohler K110 is not nice stuff to grind or sharpen, once again. I have a few hairs here which I will demonstrate the sharpness to you with. Don't know how it's going to do this on, well, let's see, do I have a piece of paper? Here's a piece of paper. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. It tree-topped that hair. That is how sharp this thing is. No resistance, no sound. It just tree-topped it. And it tree-topped it again. So, if you have enough time to spend taking this stuff to an incredibly high level of sharpness, it can get there. Which is surprising, because D2 and its analogs have these very large, blocky carbides, but with diamond abrasives you can sort of get around that. So the next couple of things I probably need to show you. God, the light's reflecting weird here. I'm going to try to show you the plunge lines. The plunge lines are even. Yeah. Plunge lines for the primary grind are dead even. Lockup is at about 55%. Basically, you do have full lock bar engagement, though, and it is a rather thick lock bar. The lock face is ground at 8 degrees. And another thing I sort of did was I slightly adjusted the angle at which the blade meets the handle. Canted it down a little bit to help it, really bite into stuff when you're cutting, because it's angled down. It wants to trap the material instead of let the material slide off the blade. Now to close this thing and show you a couple of other details. Also, I did, drill holes to accommodate the torsion bar. It has a torsion bar in there right now. One of the things that the overseas spring assists from Kershaw don't give you is a detent ball hole, because they use the torsion bar as the detent. They neglect to drill a hole. Problem there is, if your torsion bar breaks, there's no way for the knife to be detained in the handle, and it becomes quite unsafe. Because this is a discontinued model, you'd probably have a hard time finding some torsion bars for it, since, Kershaw doesn't make this anymore. So I put a hole drill in there for the detent ball. Did try it out. This does work quite well in manual mode without the torsion bar, but the torsion bar is in there right now, and with the detent ball hole and the torsion bar, this thing locks into the handle very well, and I can guarantee you this will not open in your pocket. Now let's check out that blade centering. Blade is perfectly centered. As with all the folding knives I'm doing, that's something I'm extremely proud of, because I'm having to remove so much metal to get this to be such a high performance grind that it is difficult to get the blade to center perfectly when you're done. Another thing I should probably mention, I packed as long of a blade in this handle as I possibly could, so as you can see, the tip comes extremely close to the end of the handle here. It doesn't protrude out, but it comes as close as it possibly can. Now, if you tilt the knife up a little bit, you can actually see where the tip is exposed. So if you shove your finger in there, you're going to get cut. But because I carry this, tip down, it's never been an issue. So there it is. Custom Kershaw Tremor in Bohler K110. Very pleased with how this came out. So, that's it for now. Stay tuned for future videos of knives that I'm finishing and have finished. Until then, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.